Hello, 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 beautiful people of the earth, and welcome back to the SSRI Porsche Supercup Sprint Series. This week, coming from the weather-filled Belgium around the Spa-Francorchamps. I am Kieran, joined today by Monsieur Patrick. How are you doing, my friend?
Good evening, good evening. I'm feeling good. I'm hoping for some great racing here. Spa's always one of the classic tracks. We're getting a few shots of the difference between the wet and the dry, and I mean that looks pretty treacherous there.
We're hoping for some range of weather tonight. It is only going to be, well, let's go straight to structure. So the structure for tonight is going to be a qualifier straight away to begin with, which will be 10 minutes. I can't remember already. Which then will go into the first of two sprints, which will be a 20-minute sprint. And then we'll have a short little interlude into a 30-minute sprint, which that 30-minute sprint will take the same starting positions from the qualifier. So positioning does not carry over. And I mean, even though these are relatively short races, this is Belgium, this is Spa. The weather here, just anything can pretty much happen. I wouldn't be surprised if the first and second race will have completely different conditions, one being absolutely frozen and the other being, I don't know, hotter than some of the F1 Dubai races we've got going on this year. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, the races do happen over different days, and I mean
that's true.
Saturday in-game day is the qualifying of 10 minutes, and then race 1 20 minutes, and they're 2 hours separated in game time. So those could have similar conditions, but then when you have another day filled in, then we could get that varying weather conditions. And I'm really hoping for a bit of wet in the in these Porsche Cup cars, because it just adds that extra dimension of risk versus reward with drivers having to push.
And I mean, the main thing I'm actually thinking about this circuit, which I don't know why I only just thought about really as we're talking about it, but it's actually the length. Because Spa, notably, at least within the Formula One calendar, being the longest circuit there, I believe it's just over 7 kilometers long. Average lap time around here, we're looking 2:20s, aren't we? Which normally means within a 20-minute sprint, you're not even going to be making 10 laps at that sort of pace. So
no,
you're not really going to be lapping that much. So gonna only see some of the famous Radion, however many corners you want to put it. You're only going to be seeing it about 7 or 8 times, at least within the first sprint. Second one, you'll see it a couple more times. But yeah, due to the length of this track, you're not really going to be lapping that much, are you?
No. Well, in that case, then, should we have a run through the track and get the viewers to understand exactly what they're going to be seeing around Spa-Francorchamps? So, here we are, Simsport Racing International, showing you their beautiful graphic of the Spa track circuit. So you start in Sector 1, the start-finish line there, down into La Source, then up through Radion Anneau Rouge, that little kink where it says Sector 1, down over the Kemmel Straight, into Les Combes, turns 8, 7, 8 and 9, then into Bruxelles, down turn 11, the long sweeping corner of Pouon, Campus and Stavelot lead you into Sector 3, where you then have Curb, the Paul Frere, Blanchimont, all the way down into the final bus stop chicane. Sector 3 is the fastest. Well, I think Sector 1 and 3 are probably equally as fast, because you've got basically foot to the floor for the whole thing, other than that little chicane right at the end there.
Well, it depends how you define fast, obviously, because, well, looking at the map there, you can see Sector 3 isn't really actually that long in comparison to Sector 1. Sector 1 has got a lot of straights, so I guess overall average speed, you probably are quicker through Sector 1. The main killer really being the source at the start. But yeah, overall, Spa being average speed-wise, I can imagine quite high, mainly getting killed off in the quite treacherous, actually, downhill section of Sector 2, which I can imagine because at least when I was in here last, we did keep bringing up the fact that these Porsche Cup cars don't come with TC, do they? So in terms of car control going downhill, you're going to really have to be fighting this thing quite a bit.
Yeah, and just one thing I'd like to mention is when it comes to setup around Spa, you've got two very different ways you can go about it. Because you can aim for the straight line speed, which puts you in good stead for sectors 1 and 3. And personally, I'd say is probably the better race trim because it gives you more opportunities for overtaking. But more often than not, the better hot lapping technique is to go with a bit more downforce just so you can get your car through sector 2, where most of the time can be gained and lost.
The main bit I'm actually thinking about is I can imagine there might be some weird in between almost, because one bit I am thinking it's the big part of Spa, I guess, is Radion, because naturally if you take too much downforce away, going through Radion, especially then being followed up by the Campbell Straight, you can lose quite a bit of speed going through there. So adding a bit of downforce and pretty much allowing you to take Radion flat out could play dividends and will actually make Sector 2 quite a bit more relieving, at least, so a bit safer in terms of how you could take it. But nevertheless, you then obviously lose a bit of the top end because you have now removed a bit of downforce. But naturally, Porsches in this game, top end speed, not particularly the best, which is counter to how it actually is in the real world. But nevertheless, this game doesn't really play to the Porsche's real life strengths. However, downforce has normally been one of the stronger sides in the game to the Porsche. So I could very much see Sector 2, some people being pretty creative when it comes to trying to find a different line through there, because if with the amount of sort of cornering speed you could get from one of these, I could see some pretty ballsy dives, maybe going through Pouon potentially at points. I know that's normally seen as suicide in some situations, but it could very much be possible.
Yeah, well, I think it depends more so how you lean on the car and what your driving technique sort of falls in. Because I just like to use myself and the Snack and Sons 990 team as example. So I like a stable car. I like the back to be stuck to the ground, and when I put my foot down, I don't have too much like over rotation. Whereas my teammate Matt Tubby, and definitely our fastest driver at the moment, he likes inducing oversteer and slides in the car to help him get around corners. So I think there could be a lot of that involved, where if you remove rear wing, you can induce that oversteer much easier, and if you're able to control that, then you can gain more out the car. I think it might possibly be worse on your tires, but when you're only doing 20 and 30 minute sprint races, as we will be doing today, you're probably just fine.
Yeah, you won't be focusing on that sort of thing. So yeah, I guess really when it comes to thinking how these cars might work out, pretty much, at least from what you're saying, is that going off of the Porsche, or how the Porsche is perceived in the game as well, I guess, being on the very edge or near enough spinning out at every single corner might pay dividends to your overall time, because although going downhill and sliding might be some of the most brown pants moments you'll have, it could potentially buy you a lot of time. But naturally, you're on the very edge. You just step that one bit too far, you are going to spin, which, to be honest, I can see happening pretty early on, potentially the first lap, because your tires, I can't remember if we have got tire blankets in this, so you can have some somewhat preheated tires. But overall, when it comes to getting to Les Combes, I wouldn't imagine they have warmed up perfectly. So whether sending it into that overtaking point, I guess, which actually is the source, I should say, second at that point, you'll be playing some pretty risky games. And especially with the lack of laps we'll probably be getting, then, well, you need to make those points count, as we are now looking at qualifying.
Yeah, just one final point about the whole setup and everything. If I recall correctly, our current leader in the standings, Ben Crook, who is also now on screen perfectly, he, for the Paul Ricard race, took very little rear wing and almost no toe on the rear of the car, which generally would be bad for oversteer, but it on a track like Paul Ricard, where you just have such a long straight, it gave him that straight line advantage to run away at the start of the races, and then allowed him the clean air to then manage the rest of the track. There could be a similar thing here when you get up through the Kemmel Straight. The problem you have, though, is you need to have the car stable enough to handle Raidillon and Eau Rouge, because you do not want to be bouncing a curb, causing you just to get that little bit of imbalance in the car, and then trying to fight that imbalance with a little too much steering angle can easily give you a wobble, which then throws you off into the wall. So we might not see quite as drastic a setup, but it's hard to know because we only get that kind of information if someone, if a fellow driver requests, "Why are you so quick?" basically.
Yeah. As we watch him go through it, Raidillon, that is pretty stable from the looks of things. So he might have
behind invalidated. It looked like Ben was further over, personally, but hard to judge. Oh no, not invalidated. Thank you, Chris, our cameraman from behind the scenes tonight. So yeah, it's still a valid lap. Clearly knows the track to its precise limits, because to me that looked over, but then I am a mere spectator with the angles provided.
Yeah, I think he still had a tyre just on the apex there, so yeah, pushing it to the limit. It does look like, from how stable, at least at the moment, the car is, he has given it some aero at least, maybe given the car a bit more ground clearance, just so he doesn't really go bouncing around up Raidillon Eau Rouge. And I think we are getting some time to come through. No, I'm not. I'm chatting at the moment. No, they're out laps at the moment, so I don't think a 5 minute.
Still not even made sector
5 minutes is a bit of a slow one, to say the least.
It's a start. It's a start.
It's a start.
I don't think they technically count because in game there's no times yet. But you can, I guess, get an idea of how much people are pushing. But realistically, those times are just how long you've been since you last went round. Because I've seen some where they're like 22 minutes long because you've sat in the pits for the last 10 minutes of free practice before then going out.
It's how much you've let the tyres cool down, basically.
But the front three here, the 212, the 45, and the 8 of Ben Crook, now just reaching the final bus stop chicane. So the first idea of the times we'll be getting in these optimum, lovely clear conditions of Spa-Francorchamps. 223 for Vincent Vilcek. Vestkamp a little slower, but not much. And then Ben Crook just blows them out of the park at 220.9. Although, Liebenstein, it may be 8-9 tenths. It does seem like a big amount, but if you think of it based on the amount of corners which we have at Spa, which is 20, and then you divide that 9 tenths by 20, it becomes a much smaller margin of time lost per corner. So if you can just push that little bit more through every corner, then that gap will quickly come down. Oh, as we got a car backwards.
Oh, we got a spin there. That was Mr. Tractor having a bit of a moment. I think he might have put on the throttle a little too soon, going around the source. As we ride along with Junior. Oh, never mind. We're going across to Wilkes, which we are... Which side of the track? We're coming... this is...
We're going just past Paul Frère, or Paul Frère. Curb Paul Frère into Blanchimont now. So lovely part of the track. Foot flat, but you still turn.
Fair enough. You could say that about Eau Rouge as well, depending how brave you are.
Oh, but that's the scary part.
That's true. So as we come into one of the big braking points, the bus stop chicane, trying to get a good exit out of here. Across the line, where is he going to be put?
Oh, an invalidated 2 minutes 42. So I think either an outlap or a spin
2:42 is a quick out lap, to say the least. So I think that was a push lap, or at least, well, if it wasn't a push lap, I'm going to be a little scared of what he's going to have for a main lap. I'm wondering if it was here at Radion Rouge, as he gets a big slide, kissing that second apex. But he does keep it in one piece. That might hurt his speed coming along the Camel Straight. As I will say, I don't know why, but at Spa, the helicopter camera it hits different compared to other tracks. I don't know why. I think it's just the amount of trees. I think that's just a me thing, but still. Coming along to Brussels. Now, this is an awkward braking one, because if you are carrying a bit of speed, you need to be oh so careful on those brakes, as spinning there is very easy.
Ooh, we've had some more times through, and Valenduke's just 2200ths behind Ben at the top right now. And Vargas has also snuck in a little bit, half a second down. We're seeing, the times get a little bit closer at the top end. No improvements from Ben Crook on that last one, so may have made a slight mistake. Unfortunately for the 2-1-2 of Vincent Vilcek, he's already invalidated, so he's got to push quite heavily really now hard, to get one more lap, because he's just going through Lacombe at the top of the mountain. But as actually Valenduke, we must have missed the time, because he's just gone a bit quicker.
I think he's one of the weird stragglers towards the back. He is, he's away from the, I guess, the main gaggle of cars. But that's put the pressure now onto Crook.
Oh, that's invalidated.
Why?
Surely that looked a little bit wide. I don't want to.
It's pushing. Yeah, we can't really say it too much.
Chris has not said no in my ears yet, so I think I might have been right on this one.
He's apparently kept it, which really using the track limits to his favor at the moment. But this is pretty much going to be Valenduke's last lap, as he's not really going to have enough time to get all the way around and across the start-finish. However, I'm pretty sure, actually, I think we have had a time come through from the 2-1-2. Vilcek. Did he say that earlier? Had he already got a time? I thought he didn't have a time.
Yes, no, it was Simon Wilk who hadn't set the time, the 12, who's now gone mid-pack. He's gone up to 6th.
Ah, okay.
Oh, and we've had a spin from the 111, and that's the end of his qualifying. But just heard that Ben Crook is 0.4 up, which will put him only just back on the pole position spot. So how much time can he get now into the final bus stop chicane? The car behind going a little bit deeper. It is an invalid lap, so it's just setting up for the final corner. But this time now, as we cross the line, a 220.3. He's got 2.3 tenths on Valenduke again, where is Valenduke at the moment? He is just going through Paul Frere, and he's got a friend tagging along behind him, getting a little bit of draft, hoping that they can make the line in time, because that car behind is invalid. So, and also with the time cutting down, there is no more. But look at the slides! We're getting some beautiful action for the streams. Watching Valenduke hopefully not being put off by this car going full Tokyo Drift on him behind, and now he's going Tokyo Drift, and he's gone and looked it and been given a kiss for good measure. And there he goes again around the final corner. Maybe those guys knew they were on stream. Maybe Valenduke realised he didn't have the time. I'm not too sure, but whoever that silver one car was, that was pretty spectacular.
Oh my word, this is not the sort of entertainment I thought we were going here through. That was so beautifully in sync. Oh my word. It does seem like we've got the main gaggle once again. I think at least trying to push as hard as possible. I think Crook, is he still pushing? I think he's still pushing quite hard. He's catching up with Vilcek, which is leading that main gaggle. So I'm looking across. Wilkes is coming across the line now. He doesn't improve.
Invalid lap.
Oh, he had an invalid lap.
So unfortunately for him.
Oh, there's a big snap coming through from Vilcek. No. So 0.4 up for Vilcek, which will help him Well, you'll help him
put
move
to
up
ninth,
quite
but
nicely.
he's now up a second, so that's going to put him up another spot into 8th at the moment. And well, how much more time can he make? How badly wrong did that first lap go? For anyone who is a fan of Vincent Vilcek, you'd hope that it went fairly badly, because then that would mean there's a load more time to gain if this final bus stop chicane is done correctly. And it looks to be all clean and good in the navigation of the final chicane. Now it's just about getting the power down as cleanly as possible across the line. And he goes up to 6th, a much stronger lap from Vincent Vilcek. Crook does cross the line, but no improvements from him. Vestkamp does jump up another spot to Melot, who's crossing the line right at the end, but didn't improve. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your grid for the start of the 2 races. But first up, the 20 minutes.
And for this, the first one, the 20 minutes, I mean, from at least what I seen when I was last sitting here in the booth, it almost was, sadly, it was a bit underwhelming, to say the least. But I think that was because it was literally the first race of the season and people were teething. I'm assuming the previous race we had, Paul Ricard, people were a little more aggressive with the shorter race, trying to straddle positions. In there. That's good to hear. And well, especially around here, I can imagine people are really going to be sniffing each other's bumpers as closely as possible just to keep the pressure on, because choking around here is not only very easy to do, especially with the sort of altitude changes you have, but can play dividends in the end because of just how long the lap is. Because I think I don't know why, I've been trying to do the math in my head for so long. Would it be 8 laps? It will only be 8 laps if people stick to 220s. So, not going to see the track repeat itself too often, which I guess could be a benefit depending if that's the sort of person you are. But overall, it means overtaking opportunities might come far and few, because although there are probably more than average around the Spa track, they'll naturally only really... I'm trying to think of the sort of overtaking opportunities you have. La Source is an obvious one. Then you've got probably Le Com at the top.
Yeah, so the end of Camel Straight will definitely be one, especially on the first lap, because we know these cars are good in the tow. We saw that at Paul Ricard, that you just have that extra oomph of energy when you sit behind another car. And I mean, of course, the Camel Straight isn't quite as long as the straight at Paul Ricard, but you're going into a heavy braking zone, unlike Paul Ricard, which was a very fast right-hander. So that would allow people to go for a later and more aggressive move into Le Com, as long as you can keep the balance of the car set. Because if you go too deep, that left-right switch that you get through turns 7, 8, and 9, because it's turn right, turn left, turn right, with big curbs in between, if you don't have your car balance there, you are going to go round, or at the very least, you're going to go into someone else and maybe both go round at that. So you definitely have to be aggressive, but keep your wits about you, I think, at the same time, and make sure that you're not overly aggressive to the point where you are going to mess up and not make the corner.
Yeah, so we're more than likely going to be seeing the best of the last breakers around, well, at least up there for certain. But I definitely think we're going to get to see... sorry for bringing you back, but the setups, again, I think the Camel Straight is going to really be our first point of seeing the main disparity between them, because yes, the tow you get being oh so wonderful, but the setups that some of these guys might have being quite different. Some of the people that have the higher downforce, more than likely, are just going to be left behind going through the Camel Straight. It would be a safe setup, but naturally, with the sort of... or if you're wanting to keep pace around here, you really need to be living life on razor's edge. But downhill, you'll be perfectly fine. You'll be nice and hunky-dory. So whether this is going to be more of a race of just staying alive, who knows? Because for all we know, and what we've kind of said and hoped for, as it appears on screen, I say, is rain, which could throw quite a lot of this out the window in terms of survivability.
Well, I don't expect there's going to be any for this race one. I'll happily be proven wrong, but based on the almost perfect weather conditions that we had in qualifying, and there only being a 2-hour variation, which actually, to be fair, Spa, in real life, you can get those wild weather swings. If anyone does watch any real life racing events at Spa, you will know that that weather can happen. But no, as we just get a little quick pop up with the sessions, but expected start in 20 seconds. It is indeed just a little bit cloudy, but optimum on the track, and the sun lovely and shiny. So I don't think there'll be too many issues there. But shall we have, with this little break as they start the formation lap, because it will be a long one, should we run through the standings, Kieran? Should I give us a run through?
Yeah, go on.
Right, so the man on screen just there, Ben Crook, leads the way by a significant margin, to say the least. He is 195 points in. He has won 4 of the 6 races. Second place, Vincent Vilcek, who is a little bit lower down than he may have liked, but he is with 119 points. So yeah, that makes 76, if my maths is correct, between the two. Just to quickly look at the scoring, you get 35 for a win. So with 76 being the difference, even if Ben Crook wasn't here and Vilcek won both, there would still be 6 points ahead by the end of the race. So he's basically got a throwaway week if he was after it. Anyway, moving on to third, Dan Lenson has 106. So there is a much closer gap between second and third. And for anyone who is a fan of Dan Lenson, or just for Dan Lenson himself when he watches this back, you just need to, you're in a good position right now. Fourth, you've got a car between you and Vilcek. So that's always going to be beneficial as long as you can get another car or two between there. But I mean, technically, even though there is a car between you, when you start the race, you are starting nose to tail based on how the grid works. So it might not actually be as good as I was thinking. But the person who is in the best position overall, Yannick Valenduc, starting second on the front row. He is just a point behind Dan Lenson with 105. So I think Valenduc is probably looking the best to jump a couple spots, as long as it all goes well for him here at Spa-Francorchamps this evening.
So, besides Crook, we've got some pretty close standings. I think Crook's feeling, he's enjoying the car. I think he said that on pretty much the first week when we had a little chat with him after the races. He just basically was saying he was synergizing with the Porsche so well. I can't remember if he's in the endurance series, because I'm trying to put names to who I've raced against now. Wait.
Ben is not.
Ben's not in the endurance. But nevertheless, I could imagine he'll be in a Porsche. Don't know why.
How different though the Cup cars to the GT?
That's true. That is true.
Large variation in them, I'd say still. Even though they might look very similar, they definitely do drive differently.
They drive. Okay. I haven't hopped in any of the Cup cars at the moment because I'm still a wee little baby when it comes to driving in this game. I've not done anywhere near as much as pretty much anyone here, even you. So I can't really talk too much smack. But as we are, what I want to say is we're coming to the end of possibly one of the longest outlaps we're going to have, or formation laps, not outlap.
Definitely the longest one because it's the longest track on the calendar. So
surprise.
You got that spot on.
Can't imagine why. But God, I'm running out of things to say. But it's extraordinarily long. That's all you can really say.
Let me add something for you, because I didn't actually go far enough down in the standings as I should have done. Yes. Because Simon Wilkes and Dave Jr., they line up together on the grid, and they are a point apart in the standings. 84 and 83. Simon just ahead, like on track.
If either of them are listening, send it.
Oh, we've got someone crashed! Someone's crashed!
What, on the... Oh,
someone's crashed on the formation lap. They've gone into the wall. I think damage is here. Like, damage is a thing that happens.
I'm trying to see who that was.
That was our resident drifter from qualifying.
Oh, one of them at least. Yeah, the tandems. I think that was that fourth? Was that Lenson?
That might have been Dan Lenson. I think that you may be right there. Whether or not that's enough damage to be bad for him, we will find out as they are about to cross the line and go racing.
It is Lenson. Oh, that front end doesn't
actually,
look...
no, I've got it all wrong. We've got one more corner to go because I've just been caught out by the F1 starting positions. Never mind. One more corner.
I don't know why. I was actually thinking about that as well. I was like, oh yeah, no, don't worry. So I actually, earlier on, what I said was correct, because I said the first overtaking point was actually La Source. It's not, because we've gone past it. Right. So the first main overtaking point, I guess if you don't count Radion. Yeah, it's going to be the Camel Straight going into Le Com.
I don't know if you want to go side by side through Radion and Eau Rouge with cars that don't have traction control. We'll see exactly how that goes. But we are green light racing here now. Round 4 at Spa-Francorchamps in the Porsche Cup cars here at Simsport Racing International. So far, so good. It looks like Simon Wilk got a little bit bumped out into the side. And he has actually gone into the wall and he's sideways and backwards. Has he caught anyone up in it? It looks like there may be one more car involved. Yep. Unfortunately for them, I'm not sure who was the second car at risk. It was Nicholas Malott. But it looked like there was a battle at the start. Going back to that, we've got side-by-side between Crook and Valenduc. We've got a spinner at the back further down as well. Valenduc going very sideways, and it just allows Ben Crook to go through. But now Dan Lenson with the possible damage from that formation lap, looking to try and get an opportunity to go up the inside. Will he be able to do it? It's a very long corner, and we've got another slide on from Valenduc, and it does look like he indeed has to let that position go. A hell of a lot of action here in the opening corners.
And I'm surprised because I did get a quick glance at Lenson's front bumper. It didn't look particularly well, so I don't think there's really much damage to hinder the performance of that car, because he kept Valenduc nicely wide as he's now putting his nose back in on Lenson, as these two are really, really pushing at it already, which I think will be a nice thing for Crook to see, as he's really gonna get some space as these two fight out. As Valenduc once again gets ahead. I think that was more a case of Lenson just getting caught off guard, maybe getting a bit too complicit with the positioning he managed to fight off. And I think we've just seen a retirement, sadly, because I see a pit sign next to Wilkes already.
Yeah, he might have had too much damage and just RTG'd.
It was a heavy hit, especially...
The interesting thing is it was an incident between Simon Wilkes and Dave Jr., who I mentioned just before we went green light racing. So I apologise to you two, because that I guess you can claim was my fault.
Well, I can't remember. I think I said send it for them, didn't I? So whoops. I guess that's partly on me as well. But
unless
never
caught up in something else. It might, yeah, because we did jump on board with Nicholas Malott. Thank you for just reminding me. So Dave must have been caught up in something else then, because he's now down and right at the back with a bit more air between him. And Malott's left altogether. So I think Malott is correct. Whether there was 3 cars involved then is another question. But Dave has also dropped down to the back of the grid and will have to do a fair bit of work to try and catch up. But for now, Ben Crook, first lap, fastest lap. Looks like there's a battle going on between Vilcek and Lenson. Vilcek looking to go around the outside. Can he get it into the braking point? And he does indeed, but he goes deep, and there's what I'm talking about. It didn't have the car under him completely. I think, unfortunately, Dan Lenson had to check up because the car went flying across the track in front of him. But Vilcek does make the move stick, and in terms of helping him out and reducing the advantage Valenduc will have in terms of points gaining on him with just 14 between those, Vilcek is in a much better position now in 3rd place.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about him with all of the crashes going on and around. We did bring up the fact that he wasn't really going to be, or he wasn't in a nice position, to say the least, in terms of the championship overall. But after all of that, it seems like he's in a much, much better position. And especially with the dive that he had onto Lenson, as we go back to the start of this race with all of the carnage that it happened.
So I think
we see, we had one car tag the back
behind and he's sideways.
He's gone sideways, but then he comes back across.
And I think I don't know who that is feeling sorry for them waiting afterwards, but clearly the instigator in it Yeah, sheepishly drives away.
They know what they did. And who was it? I can't remember if we found out who was. It was Junior. That was Junior that just gave a little bit of a smooch to the rear end of one of the fellow racers. Going through a Rouge is brave, to say the least, and you do need to be extraordinarily careful through there. Case in point as to why, because that is a very, very nasty bumper that just pretty much sends you across the center of the track. And sadly, the back marker just getting, well, not back marker, the person at the back, I should say, just getting picked up as well. I think we have, for some reason, I see Wilkes is moving again. He has actually come back.
Yeah, he's going for a bit of lap time to try and improve his position in the second race and just get a better feel with the car. It's great to see him. It's great to see him still going round. And as Chris mentioned in our ears, there are still points going. And with Dave Jr. only being one position ahead of him, as long as he keeps going, he's going to reduce that points difference between the two of them, which will indeed be helpful. And just here on board with von Liebenstein, now on the back of Dan Lenson. Dan Lenson does seem to be dropping with that damage he picked up in the formation lap. You could just about see it on the nose of that 31 Porsche car ahead. Just didn't quite look as pretty as it normally should do.
And it didn't seem like it was really affecting him, at least at the start, but it might be now that tyres have brought up to temp, people are settling a bit better now with the cars, that the pace really is showing, or the damage at least is really showing how much it's hurting his pace. Because I think he's already dropped, well, he was in second briefly, but then now dropping back to be threatened by Liebenstein, who's very, very complicitly keeping on his back end, is drifting around the Stavelot at the bottom of the track. So they're now going to partially come back uphill towards Blanchimont and eventually the bus stop chicane, which I'm wondering if we're going to see a bit of a send there, because this is a gaining Porsche onto Lenson. I don't think there's enough. There's nowhere near enough of a space there to make a big send, but that pace really is showing to be hurting Lenson as he gets a bit of a squirrely moment coming out of the bus stop. But once again, it seems like Liebenstein's struggling to put the power down, really, to actually be threatening Lenson. He's getting him in the brakes, but not on the throttle.
I think, just thinking back to that first lap when Dan Lenson looked quite strong, I think that might have been because of the massive slide he had. He obviously heated up his tyres a lot quicker than everyone else, so he probably had his tyres up to temperature before everyone else did. But it will 100% be affecting his straight line speed, and that's probably what we're going to see here as we get slightly obscured by the trees. But now back on with Samuel von Liebenstein. Doesn't seem to have the straight line speed you'd expect, and definitely didn't have the braking performance he was after there. The car just did not want to turn in. Got it all wrong, and someone else by the back of that looked like a possible questionable rejoin. They all got through okay, just about. Niek Vargas going off in a similar fashion, but having to take the escape route and losing a position to Vestkamp, I believe, as well. That or just a failed overtake, which now puts Patrick Tractor all over the back of him.
There is actually one thing that I didn't think I would ever really be saying in a sprint, a 20-minute sprint around Spa, but we might actually have a case where a back marker might affect the front cars. Because Crook is actually very quickly, well, Crook, Valendu, everyone at the front is very quickly catching up to this person, Mr. Wilkes. As naturally, I don't know if his car got fixed, because he did look like he just came pretty much back where he... it would have been fixed. Okay, so I am getting confirmation that it shouldn't be damaged, but nevertheless, there could be. No, he looks like he is keeping good enough pace to stay away.
It's just one of those that I think on the track map, because of the different sections of the track, like just here, as everyone else reaches the bus stop chicane and he just leaves it, it looks very close. But then as soon as they get to equal points, like you've still got the whole Formula 1 start line between the cars. It should be fine for 10 minutes, but you might be right. It might just be one to keep an eye on. But I'd just like to also take the time to say a good evening to Lulu and Daniel in chat, two fellow Snack and Sons teammates of ours that have decided to hop in and hopefully enjoying what they're seeing so far. We've got a few battles, but I think, if anything, they should be hopping into the Porsche Cup cars themselves and getting involved. Do you not think so, Kieran?
Yeah, no, they'd have quite a good time keeping up with this. Oh, you'd be right in the fights. And I mean, I'm watching chat as well. They've already called you out for the curse of the start. Is this a thing with you, that this sort of thing happens?
If you remember back to my Rocket League days, I was able to commentate a curse almost every morning. So, yes, it's very much a thing, as we've got cars side by side here. Dave Jr. and Niet Vargas. Are they going to get through cleanly? So far, so good. Ooh. So Vargas clearly had another issue because he was between the two cars ahead. Suddenly now, he's fighting for position with Dave Jr. Dave looking a little bit squirrely, but able just about to keep it going in the straight line. May also have some damage from that earlier little boink that he had with the back of Simon. Doesn't look too bad, though, from a few glimpses of the front.
Nah, it doesn't look overall massively damaged. I thought there was some initially, but I think that's just the livery he's got on that makes it look that way. Yeah, it doesn't look too banged up there. It does look like there's a little bit on the front diffuser maybe, but nothing really to be hurting him all too much. He is keeping up nicely with Vargas and he will be pushing for these positions because naturally each position matters overall.
Oh, that got a little bit close, but we've got a replay of what happened to Vargas. So does he look for a move going through the bus stop chicane, or does he just get a little bit too eager on throttle? And the latter is true. Keeps it out the wall nicely, but yeah, it does just cost him a couple positions. It's so simple. So simple to lose it in these cars without that extra traction control. You just need to make sure the car is more or less in a straight line as you then put your foot back down. But it looks like Dave's dropped off the back of this, so maybe had a few more moments himself. Just keeping an eye on the front of the grid, well, the front of the queue here. Crook and Valenduc, 1.6 seconds between them, so that gap has come down slightly from 1.9. I think it was in the last lap when Valenduc had done his fastest lap of the race. There was a 10th between them in lap time on the last lap round, with Ben Crook in favor of Ben Crook again. So I think he might just be managing that gap between the two. But if we get a similar instance of race 2 as we did to race 1, as we just have a quick look as why Dave did drop back a little bit. Was it a little bit of a lunge? So yeah, it's what we saw just before we went to the previous replay. Got a little bit too close in the braking zone, had to take evasive action, and unfortunately dropped him off rather massively from the back of that group.
Yeah, I think Dave's pushing it just a little bit too hard in these at the moment, because he's nearly had, I think that's the third one where he's nearly gone into the rear end of a car. So maybe going into the next race, he's probably going to back off a little bit, just be a little more complacent with where he is and look for the overall scheme of things, because Spa does give you plentiful places where you can try and make a move, try and dive up the inside, pretty much. Well, I wouldn't say anywhere on the track, but if you're creative enough, you could potentially look anywhere on the map. As we see Tractor going a little bit wide, which will leave the door open a tiny bit for Dave Jr., the man we're talking about at the moment. Tries to go around the outside, go for a switchback. Not enough pace, really, as we are going to be having a couple of chicanes as we go around campus into Stavelot, down to the lowest part of Spa, to now head right back up towards the start-finish line. And I'm wondering, as we brought it up before, how much is this toe going to be in the favor of Dave Jr., as he was a bit closer than last time, but it doesn't look like he's really gaining all that much. I'm wondering what sort of setup he is running, because compared to what we saw earlier on, that doesn't look like it is really as much, but he does go for a big lunge as he's managed to gain space from Tractor. As he's pushing up, he has got in front, and now there's going to be another big braking zone into La Source, as we're going to get a switchback. No, Dave Jr. does get on the gas quick enough, and he's managed to fight back a position already.
Yeah, unfortunately for Patrick Tractor, going through that final chicane just went very deep and opened the door for Dave Jr., who then had the car in the perfect position on the inside for La Source, got the move done. But these two have now dropped quite massively off the two ahead. As you can see, Niek Vargas, well, he'd clearly jumped Patrick Tractor at some point in the last lap, maybe a mistake from Patrick Tractor dropping him down, but once again, all over the back of Andreas Westkamp. So it's just whether or not Vargas can keep it in a straight line for long enough, because he's clearly got the speed overall on it, but just a few too many mistakes keeping him locked down at the back here with these guys. So can Niek Vargas get a move done on Westkamp? That is the question. 4 minutes and 35 seconds to go. Your leaders, first and second, have checked out. The gap's now down to 1.4, but I don't think it's coming down fast enough for Valenduc.
Sadly not. And as I'm looking at the track map, actually, we have kind of got 2x2 at the back. And then I think that's 3 cars in the middle of Wilczek, Lenson, and Liebenstein is there, keeping relatively close to each other, keeping each one in check. But again, it's overall coming to at least a second between the two of them, this probably being the closest gap of 0.7. But overall, it seems like they're just keeping a good pace between the two, or between the lot of them. And overall, it might just stay like this, because it seems like the sort of positioning and overall scenarios that we're seeing from everyone, we're not getting many overtaking opportunities, as a big slide comes out from Liebenstein out of the bus stop. But everyone seems to be getting very, very close, but struggling to just get the power down and make the move stick.
Yeah, unlike in GT3s, where you'd put your foot down as soon as you turn into the final part of the chicane, you have to still keep your foot lifted and just be a little bit more gentle, be a little bit more gradual with this throttle, because you don't have that traction to lean on to just keep that car pinned. Still catching a few of these guys out. A lot of them, I think Ben might be the only one that we don't really see in any of the other series. I know Valenduc was leading the Laguna Seca race on Saturday for the 6 Hours Endurance. Can't remember exactly if his team was the one who won it. He did, thank you, Chris. So, you know, him being able to jump in and out of different cars and still be right at the top is... Oh, it looks like a mistake from Von Liebenstein just possibly gives rest to that battle for 4th place for now. But yeah, it's all about just having that good right foot, I guess. As it looks like we have a switch. No, we don't. It's just a little bit squirrely on exit for Vargas. Looked like he had the move done. Oh, and it's squirrely again from the two, and then there's a little bit of contact on the right rear. The left rear, sorry, of Westkamp. Somehow Westkamp stays ahead, because he basically lost the position and then somehow took it after a little wobble from Vargas. But look at Dave Jr. here. 2 minutes to go. He seems to be on a little bit of a run, and never mind. We've got the dive up the inside. Oh, there's a little bit of a love tap. All cars very, very close together now. Dave Jr. right over the back of Westkamp. A lovely move from Vargas, though, just to send it now. Oh, Westkamp goes for it back, but he's gone way too deep. And unfortunately for him, tried to look the hero and came out with a 0. I think he's also now dropped to the back of the pack. Or has he kept it? Oh, he's just about kept it ahead of Patrick Tractor, so the gap was just about large enough there for him not to drop all the way down to 9th. Vargas did have the pace before on Dave Jr. though, but does he have it now for the last minute and 15? It'll be one more lap to go because the leaders have just gone through the source.
Yeah, I think adrenaline really kicking in there, pushing a little too hard and sending it way, way too deep. And I think Dave Jr. once again just sneaking in. He's kind of done this at the back of the pack. We kind of writ him off at the start after having that big incident at the start, but he has kind of just slowly snuck his way through the pack at the moment. We naturally did see the overtake he did onto Tractor, but overall he has managed to just almost worm his way back into these back fights that are going on, which I think will overall be he'll be very thankful for his championship standings as we keep watch.
We've missed a big incident, between Valenduke, well, just on Valenduke's behalf, because he's dropped to 6 seconds the gap now to Crooks. So clearly pushed just a little bit too hard, had a big moment. I mean, he had the gap behind to be able to push that little bit harder than he maybe would have been comfortable with. And it, unfortunately for him, didn't work out in the end and has cost him time, but only time. Still got 7 seconds ahead of Vilcek in 3rd place. And that might also give him just that little bit of extra information he needs for race 2 when it comes to having the gap. Well, because obviously we go back to the starting grid position. So they're 1 and 2 again are Ben Crook and Yannick Valenduke. So it might just help him in that sense. But right now, on screen, we've got this final battle for P6. Dave Jr. currently all over the back of Niek Vargas. Half of Sector 3, almost all of Sector 2, completed now. Sector 3, the last part of the track to go. And it looks like it's just all gone for Dave there. Gets a slight wobble going through Stavolo. And as long as Vargas keeps it clean, it should be all good. As on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, Ben Crook crosses the line to once again win another race here at Simsport Racing International in the Cup cars, and he wins race 1 of the Spa-Francorchamps round 4, with Yannick Valenduke quickly following in 2nd.
And overall, I think Crook's in such a strong position in the championship, and he's proving why. He's just got unreal pace pretty much around any track we've seen so far. I'm not sure, because you said he won, was it 6 out of the 8? No, 4 out of 6. 4 out of 6, other way around. Of the races. What were the 2 he didn't win? Because I saw back-to-backs.
The 2 he didn't win were from Andrew Richardson, which I think was in round 2. Problem for anyone who doesn't want Ben Crook to win is that Andrew Richardson only really showed up for Silverstone after race 1, and then he has since dropped out because he has too much on his plate, unfortunately. So yeah, Richardson won both races at Silverstone and then peaced out. So it's back to
leave it on a high. Leave it on a high.
Yeah.
As we watch Wilkes come round the final corners, although having a massive moment at the start of the race, coming back just to claim the points, smart move to say the least. Because in the end, this sort of thing will pay dividends overall. But
unlike Lincoln Park, it does actually matter in the end.
Yeah. Nice.
But nice. I do think as well, because of Dave Jr. being the one that did start that big incident on the Eau Rouge and Radion, it could very well be a point where Dave Jr. does drop 2 places depending on whether or not it gets reported. It's all down to the drivers. There is post-race stewarding for these events, but it is down to the drivers whether or not they want to report the incidences they get involved in. Maybe they'll talk it out and settle things outside of the steward's room. It's all down to the drivers at the end of the day. But yes, Simon now finally crossing the line and finishes in 10th.
And as we have a brief moment to see the in-game chat there, I did see them saying that Crooks just got jet boosters in the car. And to be honest, with the sort of domination we've seen from him, near enough around any track we've had so far, I would be inclined to believe them. But I think the main scary thing is the fact that he's not only got pace, but he's got the consistency to back it up. Because albeit Valenduc, as you mentioned, was catching Crook for the latter part of that race, it just seemed like there was a moment where he maybe had quite a scary wiggle. Maybe he just lost it a little bit too much, and he dropped back those 6 seconds. But it's almost seeming like he's invincible at this point, which I don't want to play or to run the Crook train too much, because naturally, if Valenduc does get a good run, I would very much believe he could hold him behind him with the sort of defense you can do around this map.
Yeah, well, we've got 30-minute race this time round, and we did see an attempt from Valenduc up the inside of the Le Combe after the Kemmel Straight, but with the tyres not being quite up to temperature and having to ride the curbs at the extreme levels he did, he just lost that ground and lost the gap, and then it basically just became the management show from Ben Crook at the front. I think he didn't have to push as long as the gap stayed consistent.
Yeah.
Like, I think whenever Valenduc made a lap, like there was a point where Valenduc was 0.3 quicker than Ben Crook on the in the second or third lap, and then ever since then it was within 1/10 either way. I think it was more just management on the side of Ben Crook, just being able to keep the car going the way he wants to, how he wants to, and in a comfort zone for him, which is the worst thing you want to hear if you're any other driver. But the leader of the race is just in his comfort zone and is not really being pushed to the extreme. But when you get that early gap, that's just what can happen. So as you say, we're hoping that the gap can stay closer. And also, I don't think we can really count Dan Lenson out of this as well. I'd like to hope not.
No.
As long as he doesn't put it in the wall in the formation lap again.
Yes.
Then he gives himself a much better opportunity of also striving to attack the front end of the grid.
Naturally, I don't want to write off the weather too much, as
we're
hoping for variety, to say the least. Whether we go to the extremes of rain, who knows? Maybe snow. I don't think the game does snow, does it?
No.
Nah.
It's the craziest weather it does is storms. But
we'll get a monsoon
basically
in
a
just
flooded.
for us, because I do know on this track, if it does rain quite heavily, you can have some pretty nasty puddles laying around, which can offset your car if you go offline too much. So that will be something that would be quite scary to look out for, looking into the next race. But hopefully, like you say, Lenson definitely won't be one to turn down if he keeps everything in one piece, because it sadly did look like it started to hurt him in terms of overall pace. He did keep 4th in the end, with the overall pace being a bit better than Liebenstein, because Liebenstein had a couple of big moments himself, getting a bit squirrely coming out of the bus stop, and especially around the bottom of the track around Stavolo. He just didn't seem overall too comfortable with how the car was performing, as he did look up the inside a couple of times of Lenson, but overall that gap just then grew as Lenson settled into his damaged vehicle. And then Vilcek as well. I'm wondering, because we kind of put Vilcek off for a little bit thinking about it, because he started in 6th, if I'm not mistaken.
it was a bit further down than we would have thought, but because of the incidences that happened, he just sort of shot up through the field and then held on to a very very comfortable 3rd place in the end. I mean, he always had Dan Lenson's only about 1.5 seconds behind, I think, but
yeah,
even then it was at a point where he was never troubled. But I'd also just like to say, we can't forget Simon Wilkes. He got his race ruined, unfortunately for him, in that big incident. But for the final lap, he was the 2nd fastest car on track. I mean, taken for granted, he was still a 2.5 slower than the leader, Ben Crook. But he was very much up there with the majority of the drivers further down in the grid. Valenduc, I think, is the only one that could probably keep pace overall with Ben Crook. So I'd expect once again to see those two probably just slip away at the front. But you never know. You never know. As we say, the weather could have an effect. If it's not exactly a difference between wet and dry, if it's just cloudy, if there's a bit more wind coming from a different direction could cause the cars to feel a bit different in certain sections and scenarios without the traction to assist you. So there's a load of little things that could make a difference. Maybe the track's just 2 degrees cooler or something, which affects how the rubber grips. I think
maybe drifting at that point is good.
Yeah, well, Dan's been our resident drift king so far. So whether or not he keeps that up, we'll see.
Well, hopefully he's not going to drift too much because, albeit it was very entertaining in qualifying as he had a tandem partner, which I can't remember who was.
That was Valenduc.
Was that Valenduc?
Valenduc was still pushing for a lap though, while Dan was just taking. He saw the chance for some airtime following in closely and took full advantage of it, I should say.
But yes, looking at the standings, I'm trying to remember, where did Nick Vargas end in the end? Was he one of the ones that got taken out?
No, Vargas was ahead of Junior right at the end. Those two were battling.
They were at the back because he was in third. Because naturally, he got caught up in the big incident at the very start.
He didn't get caught up in it. I think he just we saw it throughout the race. It was a question of not being comfortable with the car, but it's slowly coming to him more and more as it went on. I think it was more a case of just maybe a lack of practice for him.
Maybe an off day,
yeah, or just lost the rhythm, so to speak, and took him a few laps because we did see the car go deep into Lacombe once or twice and then drop, and then there was another mistake that dropped him further. I think it was just that. It was just a set of consistent mistakes that unfortunately cost him a load of positions, but then we did see at the end the pace difference that he did have, and he very much started pushing his way back through the track. And then Dave Jr. again, it was respectful of him to wait after the little tap that caused Simon and Nick to have that big crash on Radion and Eau Rouge, but he did wait. Obviously, the cars then were not facing the right direction or not in a state to have been driven, so sheepishly ran away, but did very much catch up to the back of the grid and then start making moves through. So I think in this race too, there is a good chance that we'll see a lot more midfield pack battling. And whether or not that helps or hinders, we'll have to find out, because obviously if someone just about sneaks ahead of the group and then and sits in third, and then fourth, fifth, sixth all start having a good old tussle, that gap can quickly form. They may not be the fastest driver, but as long as there's a load of battles happening behind them, they can sneak away, and as long as then they can manage or keep the gap, they could be on for a brilliant finish.
So yeah, hopefully the driver's looking more for the long run, to say the least, because although it's only a 10-minute difference, 10 minutes can make quite a big impact in the overall gaps that were there, because we were looking at the gap between Valenduc and Crook. Maybe if it was that extra 10 minutes, maybe Valenduc didn't need to push as hard, which then overall cost him that little mistake, because he was catching up with Crook. But I'm still looking at the standings going into this second race. It almost feels really just mixed up in terms of how we finished with where the drivers are now, because some of the drivers we were praising or giving their praise to, so like Vilcek and Wilkes, are down in 6th and 7th, which I don't know why. It's like short-term memory loss almost for me, but that's just how they didn't feel like their qualifiers went as well, but the race overall playing a bit more into their favors. So thinking about into this race, odds on Valenduc maybe pushing it a little harder, although I did say it's being a longer race and potentially being a bit safer, but I can see Valenduc maybe pushing a little harder just to get ahead of Crook so he doesn't run away.
That could well be a play, but it's one of them that it all depends on your run out of Radion, I think. Because it doesn't exactly matter if you slip in. Well, I think realistically, actually, if you're second place as Valenduc, you want to try and slip in behind Ben as soon as possible in order to then get the slipstream all the way down the back here of the Kemmel Straight. Because if you can do that, and you give yourself the opportunity for the slipstream right off the bat, the problem is, though, you'll have the extra overspeed, and if you don't take that into account when you get to Le Com, you can then have the issue on brakes and the tyres not gripping as you'd expect / hope for. So it's one of them that it's... I think the aim realistically should just be not to lose a second or a second and a half within the first lap. If he can keep it at half a second, then the battle will surely be on, because he's still be in slipstream range. And we did see the gap overall before that final lap go down by half a second, just on pace difference alone, from 1.9 to 1.4 between Valenduc and Ben. So I think realistically he just has to avoid a mistake. The problem is he can't just think about Ben ahead, because he's got everyone else behind him.
Well, yeah.
And Dan Lenson was very eager to have a look up the inside on that first lap of race 1 as well. And as long as there are no big incidences further down the field, I think he might not be the only one.
Yeah, indeed. So, and actually thinking about the draft going along, well, maybe not the Kemmel Straight, but at least Radion, you do have a bit of dirty air. So you almost, it's an annoying one to say the least, because as you say, going along the Kemmel Straight into Les Combes, you do get a very, very nice bit of overspeed. But going through Radion Eau Rouge, it's a bit more scary because of the dirty air. Although you get more speed, that more speed going through possibly one of the scariest flat-out corners on the planet, I potentially say. Hence why it's such a notable one for Spa. It is scary when you have, or you're comfortable when you know you don't have any slipstream, but when you get that slipstream and the dirty air, I'm wondering if that's the sort of scenario that kind of caused the incident in the first race, because it's one of those things that can put you off almost, staying too close behind. But
well, it's sort of just
a way up.
Track lends
it's
itself,
way up, yeah.
With the start finish line being just before it, at least. But the interesting thing is that's the start finish line just for the start. Sorry, it's the start line. It's not the finish line. It's solely the start line. The finish line is still where they start the F1 races, and it's catching me out clearly just speaking about it. So I'd understand if anyone else has trouble understanding that. But I think it's just in order to reduce any sort of major pileups in La Source. The downside of that is it does keep cars very much side by side going up through Eau Rouge and Radion on that first lap, which is a pretty dangerous place to be in, because there's only one line through it.
Yeah.
Thankfully, obviously, it's halfway down that straight before the climb, so you do not have anywhere near as much speed as you would do if you put your foot down from La Source straight up and through. But even then, it's one of them that you very much have to be wary of where you're going, as Valenduc just gets a little bit too eager warming the tyres up for the final chicane there. You have to be wary of exactly what you're doing. Also be wary of everyone else around you, and hope that everyone's got their wits about them, because as we spotted, any incident at the front of the grid can tail back and take other people out who are doing nothing wrong further down.
You get some unfortunate moments, because I mentioned it at the start of towards middle, I should say, of that the last race. The bumper, with how just the track layout works, does bring you back across. So if you are straight lining Eau Rouge, you are going to bounce straight back through the middle of the pack if you're at least crashing at the front. As we come to the start line for the GT3s, at least, or for near enough anything else, with a rolling start, as it is a green flag, and Valenduc actually does get a bit of a good start, holds off though due to that danger factor through Eau Rouge, as a couple of cars go a bit wide side by side. And I think that's Lenson coming alongside, getting a good overspeed onto Vargas, as the front two somewhat already making a good gap from the getaway from the rest of the pack. And so far,
we got 3 wide further back though, but
made, and a lot of drama happening towards the back of the pack.
No, we're clean.
And at the moment, we're very clean at the moment, as Lenson and Vargas are still side by side. A bit of a switchback. And it's going to be a late braking move, as this is a really scary place to do it on the downhill corner of Lake Com, or not Lake Com, Brussels, sorry. God, I'm catching myself off. And as we now come into Pouhon, and I think Lenson is going to get away with this one, as now Vargas is going to be pressurized by Vilcek, who's actually made his way up through the pack as Liebenstein's dropped back towards the back of the pack. I think they were caught up in that 3 wide, and now Valenduc is really keeping up with Crook, trying to keep the pressure on. But Crook isn't being phased by any of these moves and is sticking to his line so he can keep a nice lead from everyone else. And I think at the moment we've now gotten into the settling stages as we head a little more one by one through the track.
Yeah, it's the battle that was happening at the front. It's I think it was the right thing for Valenduc to do, not to make a move, just to sit in behind, because the big events, the switching places that Lenson and Vargas had with massive load of side-by-side for the first half of the track, it allowed those two just to break away a little bit. They seem to be being caught back up again as there's a few moves back and forth. It looks like Simon's gone for a move up around the outside of von Liebenstein, actually, and I think it's worked for him, but so far so good. And yeah, just to bring your attention, you might not quite be able to see it in the top right of the individual screens, but the track's only fast right now. So as it's 11:12 in game time, a little bit cooler conditions, a little bit cloudier. The track's not quite up to optimum conditions, which will mean it won't be quite as fast for the drivers. The grip won't be there, so there's more and more chance of a slip and a slide. But so far, and touch wood that it stays this way, there have been no incidences.
Yeah, so far, praises all around for the clean racing. As I think you mentioned earlier on, Liebenstein dropping back once again to Wilks. So Vilcek and Wilks, we've kind of mentioned the fact that they probably didn't have the qualifier they want, but their race pace seems to be playing dividends at the moment, as they're both of them making their way up the pack. I think they're now going to have their eyes on the fight we're seeing top left at the moment between Lenson, oh no, that is them. Lenson, Vargas, and Vilcek. Now, I don't think there's many opportunities they're going to be seeing at the moment, as actually behind Vilcek and Vargas, I think I just saw 2 cars go side by side.
Yeah, von Liebenstein's attempting to make a move back on Simon Wilkes, but you've got Dave Jr. just sneaking around behind there too, so there's that little bit of a give and take, and I think that's exactly what we're seeing with these two battles of 3 cars each. I thought maybe Dan Lenson had snuck away from this, but after it looks like Vargas has just regained enough to pull that back in and make it a little 3-way tussle. And when you're the car in the middle, you've got the most to think about here, because you want to try and push to get back onto the guy ahead, but you've got to be wary of the person behind at the same time. And if you try and make a move that then puts you offline slightly, that guy behind could easily think, well, that's a spot for me, shove his nose somewhere that then either cuts you off from a switchback or catches you out unawares, that can easily make you either lose the position, or if you're really not paying enough attention, just turn straight into them.
If we come across a start what? No, you caught me off guard now. The finish line, to say the least. As Lenson is actually the one that goes fastest at the moment. Probably the one with the cleanest air at the moment. He's going to want to try and get away from Vargas and Vilcek, who are just going to be in a battle of their own. And looking to times, once again, Crook is pulling already onto Yannick Valenduc, because that gap at the end of the last lap was only really just hitting half a second, and now we're getting into 0.75s. So a quarter of a second near enough being pulled per lap by Crook.
I have to say though, just that Dan Lenson holds the fastest lap, but it's not because he did the fastest lap, it's just those two drivers ahead did not have a clean lap that was actually valid on track, because Ben Crook with 21.3, which is the purple lap according to Pit Wall Live, but because the game's not giving it to him, it basically tells us that he invalidated somewhere and possibly gained a track cut, which 4 track cuts around Spa gets you a drive-through, and that drive-through probably costs you about 40 to 50 seconds because it's the double pit.
It's a painful one, yeah.
So you got to keep aware of that. It's with a 30-minute race, it's just a little bit more likely, especially when you're on fast conditions as well. You don't quite have the grip that you did in race 1. It's easy to try and take the same lines where you might just end up that little bit wider.
As we come back onto almost the talking point of this race so far, these 3 cars, Lenson, although I said he was nicely pulling some space between the 2 cars behind, I don't think that gap's really increased much more. Now we're settling more into the mid stages of the race, where it's going to be more of a mental game to say the least, as a deep dive from Vargas comes in, which is going to bring Vilcek right up to his bumper. It's potentially a move looking into the source is going to be done here. As Vargas is holding that inside line. Vilcek dives to the outside late as possible, so he's going to give himself a good move from into Rouge Radion, and yeah, like you said, behind him, Simon Vilks really getting close there.
I'm not sure about this, though. I'm not sure about putting your nose up here.
This is a bold move, to say the least. He does back out to allow...
Oh, and he's gone very, very wide. That's a possible track cut there, but the problem that they've done, well, the problem that you can see that Vilcek's done is he's compromised himself so much by just sticking his nose in at the bottom of Eau Rouge that Simon's just said, hey, thanks for that, I've got a run on you now, and slips right on by.
Now Vilks is going to be the one, I think at the moment, I was going to say he's going to be looking in the rear mirror just to try and hold off Vilcek for the time being, but Vilcek unsettling the car will give Vilks a little bit of breathing room, to say the least, for the time being. Now his eyes may be looking forward a little more to Vargas, who's trotting along quite happily at the moment to see these 2 fighting in his rear mirror, as he is going to try and get a bit more of a gap once again to give himself not only some breathing room, but also look forward to Lenson, who originally I thought the fight was actually going to be with.
Well, yeah, you can see in the bottom right here, we have actually got a battle for the lead going on, because Valenduc is right on the tail. The lap time between first and second on the last lap was 0.08 was the difference between the 2 of them. But that doesn't explain why Valenduc is right on his tail right now, actually, and maybe even thinking of a move here into the bus stop chicane. Depending on the run he gets, does he go for the lunge? Will Ben defend up the inside? No, they both just elect to hold station for now. And I think what Valenduc's doing is probably thinking the long run. But, that's the margin. That's how close it can be. A little bit of a slide going through the final corner, and the gap just stretches that little bit more and give Ben just a little bit of breathing room. It goes from half a car to about 2.5 car lengths. But in the meantime, while all that was happening, we did miss a move between Dave Jr. and Samuel von Liebenstein. So Dave now up into 7th, still trying to, I'd say, chase down Simon, because as I mentioned at the start, prior to any races going on, we've got a big slide from Vilcek there. Where was he off to? Somehow kept the car going in the right direction. A brilliant catch, but that's Dave now looking up sneakily. He's going to have to go the long way around the outside, but as long as he can hold it side by side, he then gets the inside line. But the position is changed and set before they even get to the corner. But even with slides and even with a little bit of curb, they somehow both still make it through cleanly. And unfortunately for Vilcek, that's 2 positions in 2 laps after the Kemmel Straight, because he just got a bit too eager going into Eau Rouge and Radion.
I feel like this is summarising how Dave's racing at the moment, because he's almost the lurker of the race. Doesn't do too much, sits around, someone makes a mistake, he whips through. He's thanking everyone. He's I don't want to say, it's not really the dark horse, I don't know how to put it. He's almost in a dark horse because of the livery design he's got of his car, but at the moment he is capitalising beautifully on pretty much any mistake that happens directly in front of him. I'm wondering if that's the sort of overtake he got on Liebenstein as well, which, actually looking back, Liebenstein's really not having the best race, because he's not really been caught up in any major incident, but he's just fallen through the pack quite drastically, to say the least. So maybe not hit the best day for him, as once again Junior, actually by the looks of things, is actually getting some good pace away from Vilcek. So I'm not sure if it was more the qualifier on him, but overall the race pace that Dave's got on him is beautiful.
Well, once again, the leaders quite close, and this time round Valenduc did keep it clean going through the final chicane. So all eyes on the bottom right as we start the new lap and look towards Radion and Eau Rouge. As long as Valenduc can get this line correct, keep it in bounds and keep it going straight, and it looks like he's done a brilliant job there, I think there might be a little change of position at the end of this. It all depends on how much rear wing he's getting though, because there is some point in the lap where Valenduc has a massive go, but in there he elects to pull out the toe. So I think he's very, very happy just holding station at the moment, because they are pulling. I mean, currently it's only a 3.3 second gap to Dan Lenson, who's doing a great job of more or less keeping within reaching distance at the moment if there is a bit of a battle or a bit of a mistake from one of these two. But yeah, Janiek not yet looking for a move, just happy to sit and follow.
I'm wondering if he's doing something that Crook almost doesn't seem like he's really had in past experiences, which is actually a bit of pressure from someone behind him. As the amount of gaps he's had has pretty much been really extortionate. So now Valenduc, like I say, biding his time, getting really late on the brakes into some of these sectors, trying to just keep Crook in check, forcing something out of him. At the moment, Crook really isn't shifting. Vilcek really showing the one that he's more of sadly, the one that's vulnerable due to the sort of exits he's had, especially out of the bus stop. As now the toe is going to be coming in the favour of Valenduc. I don't think that he's pulling on Crook as much. As I say that gap is really coming down, and I think there's going to be move here into the bus stop chicane as they go side by side here, and Crook is squeezing Valenduc on the outside. Valenduc does back off, goes wide, but he's going to get a much better exit here, down here, but he gets a bit squirrely once again coming out of the bus stop, and Crook gets to have a little bit more of a breather again, but that braking from Valenduc really bringing him back into the fight quite a lot. And again, as you mentioned last lap, if he gets a good exit through Eau Rouge here, he's going to have a very nice chance. Looking ahead to the end of the Kemmel Straight into Les Combes. That's again a nice exit. I don't think the overspeed is really going to be there all that much. He's going to bide his time once again going through Sector 2.
It does seem to me that Valenduc is running a bit more downforce, because he doesn't seem to have any difference in speed even when in the toe going down the Kemmel Straight. But we just saw the massive difference when going through Curb Pour Frere and Blanchemont into the chicane, where I think that extra downforce maybe is causing, well, the lack of downforce on Ben Crook's car could be what's possibly causing a lift or two going through those fast corners. And it does just seem to be massively pinned on the side of Janiek. So it's my presumption. We won't really know unless we get a chance to ask these guys, as we have also just ticked past the halfway point. But I'm guessing, Valenduc's running just a little bit more downforce, which is obviously costing him possibly the best overtaking chance, which is at the end of the Kemmel Straight. But it matters more here, and you can definitely see exactly where it counts at the end of the lap. But unfortunately for him, did just miss a little apex or two going through Campus and Stavolo, and it's given Ben a little bit more breathing room.
So sadly, looking this time around, he's probably going to really be using the Blanchimont as a more catch-up area. It does seem like the brakes on Valenduc are working out a little bit better in his favor, as there you can see the gap really closing down. I know it's not really too easy to tell until they get out of the corner. That gap definitely has come down quite a little bit. He's gained at least 0.1 of a second onto Crook just in that one corner. Now, getting a little squirrely there once again. It just doesn't seem like the Valenduc setup really working in his favor, because he's a bit unsettled on the throttle, but then again, going down Kemmel Straight, it doesn't seem like he's got enough straight line speed to really make to get the overspeed onto Crook. Crook overall just seeming like to have the better Spa setup.
This Al, I think, has gone on the back foot for now. So should we give a little bit of love elsewhere, as this gap's actually almost reached a second now of back lead. So Ben's seen his chance to capitalise, and I
have just seen something happening with Vilcek actually. Junior and Vilcek. There's
let's drop to the back.
0.05. Something's happening here.
Slowly.
That's true.
A few things happening down the rest of the grid. As it looks like Veskamp had a moment. Whether or not he kept it out of the wall, this is another question. But as you mentioned, Vilcek right over the back of Dave Jr. So following on from his mishap, which allowed Jr. just to slip right on by, he is now starting to apply the pressure and try and work his way back up to where he qualified in 6th place. But for now, Dave doing a stern and solid defensive job. But did get a little bit of a slide on there. You just saw the tyre marks on track. So although it's working out so far, that's not the best way to be going around the track. You don't want to be leaving your tread on the track, because you want that on the wheel, because that's where it does all the performing.
Well, I mean, we've had enough drifting around here, to say the least. As I think we go back and see what happened.
Does he keep it out the wall? Does he keep it out the wall? Does he keep it out the wall? Oh, no. It's a kiss. But I think that's the least of his worries. That could have been so much worse.
Yeah, very, very much so. As now that's going to be a big dive if it was one, but late braking again. Seems like the story at the moment on this race. As braking or going into braking zones, Vilcek seems to be a bit more in check than Dave Jr. He's nearly going into the back of him several times. Some really close racing from these, as Dave Jr. has gone a little bit squirrely. Doesn't seem like it's actually affected him all too much, as Vilcek is just keeping back a little bit, maybe to get a better run through Radion Eau Rouge, and is looking ahead to get to the end of the Kemmel Straight with a little bit more speed, as I think that was Junior taking a bit too much curb. We've seen that already. He doesn't get the speed he wants, as Vilcek, I think, is just going to have enough speed to be straight past Dave Jr. as we get into Les Combes, and that move is done. But obviously, it can all go away very, very quickly if you don't keep the car in check, as now we're going to be heading back down the hill, as Dave just keeping an eye on that inside line to make sure it doesn't open too much. And as I say that, Vilcek does go a little bit wide. Dave potentially trying to take a bit of an optimistic move there, as it would be quite dangerous, as we have seen Wilczek go into the wall. Junior's taking the place back, but getting on the gas a little bit too soon by the looks of things, and the car just getting really offset.
And now Von Liebenstein's having a little sniff. Wilczek going from the highs of 6th just after making the move to the pitfall of the car, and the car is not balanced, and now it's a little bit slidey. Well, I don't know how hard the hit was, because it's a side-on one, it might be okay, but still just clearly not settled following the incident. Has a few more moments, gets too much curb and goes a little bit more sideways, which then allows the move to be completed by Samuel, and the gap start to grow in that case. And if you look in your bottom right, there is still that battle going on for first after the little breathing period that they had. It looks like it may have come back, and plans on starting once again. But yeah, Wilczek, an unfortunate lap. But speaking of, Von Liebenstein's gone very deep and may have just opened the door once again. Gets squirrely on exit as well, giving each other a lot of respect. Now though, Wilczek on the inside for La Source might just be able to see this one through. There's a lot of squeezing going on here, and Von Liebenstein has to very much back out of it. Gets very sideways as well, gets saved by that sausage curb running parallel to the track, and Wilczek regains one of his lost spots, but unfortunately for him, now finds himself about 5 seconds off the back of Dave Jr.
Yeah, back of the pack, sadly being a little more accident prone at the moment. It's looking back towards the front, the bottom right of Crook and Valenduke. That gap, like you say, has come down, but I don't think it's come down as much as we potentially expected, because it was only looking at about a second. We are now down to a 0.7 as Crook, a rare mistake, has gone very sideways and very wide, coming out of...
cost him though.
It doesn't seem to have cost him too much. Very surprising, to say the least. He's actually gained a bit of speed on that one. Not sure how he's managed to do that, but a very rare mistake, to say the least, coming out of Brussels. And a bit of a terrifying moment, especially with how close he got to the wall.
Does show the rest of the field, though, that if you keep the pressure applied, there's a chance he can crack. Valenduke's been within the seconds for the whole 23 minutes and counting of this race so far. Just over 7 minutes to go, and it's still all to play for at the front here. Von Liebenstein's still hanging within a second of the back of Wilczek, but everyone else seems to have settled at the moment. So this is the main battle to watch, and you can see just how much Valenduke, he closes so much into that final chicane. And yes, curb taken from Ben Crook. Not really what you want to see. Well, not what you want to see if you're Ben Crook. It's exactly what you want to see if you're behind in Janiak. You can tell that this pressure is starting to affect him more and more. Unfortunately for Valenduke, there's only 6.5 minutes now to go, and he's really got to try and get that gap down by another car length or two if he fully wants to give himself a chance at winning this race.
And I was actually going to say, Crook didn't look like he was going to be in the best position, because I think getting so sideways burnt the tyres a little bit. They have now settled down nicely, but coming out of Sector 3, going into the bus stop, or at least through Sector 3, I should say, he did look a little cautious, because that gap came down very quickly. And I think we said as well, Valenduke, especially having a setup that seems to favour Sector 3, this is going to be a dead heat toward all the way to the end by the looks of things, if no one makes an extortionate mistake. PTSD area for Crook now. Seems to get through a bit better, but Valenduke's turn coming out of this one doesn't go as wide, and it doesn't seem like it's as scary a moment, but that is going to drop him back and allow Crook a bit more breathing room once again. And it just seems like almost a trial by fire in terms of mistakes between these two at the moment. it does seem like it must be a downforce setup from Vandendoek, because he does look like he's carrying a lot more speed through some of these midsection corners, and especially in sector 3 where you've got the high speed corners of Blanchimont. He is getting that gap to come down quite a bit. And now that gap is going to close in quite nicely. I think this is this is similar to what we had before, as we're going to probably have side by side, or at least a dive maybe coming into the bus stop. No,
I think he's too far back still.
He is too far back. Yeah, I think that's a bit surprising, because especially the sort of overspeed Vandendoek's had in the past.
Oh,
I'm surprised he didn't go for a move, as he does get sideways once again.
He has brought the gap down by about half of what it was, though. But you have to think, with the time left on the clock, 4 minutes and 10, it's going to be this lap and one more. Because by the time they get through, I don't think it's quite enough to put them on a third lap. So it's going to be very, very tight. But I feel like this is now the penultimate lap of the race. So Vandendoek has to make a move stick, but he looks very, very close here. And if you look at the bottom right, look at the speed difference now. Alex for the outside, though. It's an interesting choice, but if he can hold it around here, you'll then have the inside for the second part of Lacombe. One part good. Side by side they go, but he takes a little bit too much curve and then ends up in the wrong spot. Can he try for a switchback? No, Ben carries good speed, but is still going to look for it. He's going to be squeezed a little bit to the inside, has to back out, but look how close they are. You can't really get any closer than this.
Some very good respect between these two drivers, so much so that the actual overlay has bugged out and Vandendoek somehow taken the lead of the race. But my word, what a move, to say the least. As now I think Vandendoek is going to bide his time once again, looking into that third sector where he does get quite a bit of nice overspeed. I think looking back up the Kemmel Straight, Crook did have a little bit of a brown pants moment coming out of Radion, maybe having a little bit of or having to lift, as he wasn't probably going to make it. He's gone wide.
Sand.
I am wondering about track limits.
Yeah, you've surely got to think that one of them could well be on a 3 warnings for track cut. I'm surprised that thankfully none of the drivers have picked up one, but yes, we are definitely indeed only going to have one lap left, because we've just passed the lap times that these guys are doing, which is 2 minutes 20. So the penultimate chance for Yannick Vandendoek here to go for a move. He's going to be forced to the outside. Can he brake later and hang it round the outside of the first part of the chicane? It doesn't look like it. He's just going to go for a bit of a double switchback, force Ben to take the more defensive line. They both get a slide on, unfortunately, which means that they stand ground. Each of them still 4/10 apart, but Vandendoek once again closing on the brakes, just pushing it a little deeper. One more lap then. Can he do it? Can he get the move? Can Vandendoek take the lead of the race on the final lap of the race and cause what most would consider an upset?
Very much so. With the sort of performance Crook's been putting in, he's very much been kept in check this race, as it seems like he gets a much better exit out of Radion compared to last lap, and I think that's going to keep Vandendoek behind him, at least into Lacombe. And I'm wondering the sort of aggression, look at this, that we're going to see from Vandendoek, who is really pushing now to try and keep up with Crook as he looks ahead. Where is he going to make the move? It's not going to be anywhere through here just yet. Brussels is probably going to be a write-off, as that gap between him and Crook is a bit big, to say the least. Pouon is probably a very dangerous one, as both of them make it through Brussels, as they've both had scary moments there, getting sideways. Pouon, both keeping good speed. That gap not really changing much at the moment.
This is the bit. This is the corner, I think, where Vandendoek closes the most. He's got a later braking point that really just squeezes him up. I think he's able to trail brake just that little bit better going into campus. And now it's all down to this corner. Can Ben keep it clean? Because Vandendoek definitely has the overspeed coming out of Stavelot and onto Kerpol Frere. So far, so good for Ben Crook. Just one more major braking zone to go. The clock hits 0, so it is now or never.
So that gap is closing down very, very quickly. The bus stop is just here. Valenduc is quite a bit way back. He's going to be very late on the brakes in comparison to Crook, but that door is kept closed. This is going to be a drag race, as very sideways from Valenduc will sadly write off any chance he does, as Crook this time having to defend for his life to get that victory overall.
I have to say, brilliant racing from both of those. The whole 30 minutes within a second, keeping us on the edge of our seats. Just great battling, fair racing from the two of them. And Ben, unfortunately for Yannick Valenduc, did not quite crack under the pressure. But Dan Lenson not too far back in the end, just 3.2 seconds down after all those battles between them. Vestkamp, the final car to pass across the line, and that is going to be the end of round 4 Porsche Cup cars here at Spa-Francorchamps with Simsport Racing International. I have to say, even though we only just about got a 10-car grid, it was still some brilliant racing.
Very much so, and I think what we can take away from this, despite the sort of domination we're seeing from Crook, there is a human aspect in there. That rare mistake that we saw coming out of Brussels. Admittingly, it seemed to be quite a common one across the grid, but nevertheless, that shows he is one of you. He is one of the humans, as we are called. And he does make his own mistakes, and especially with the fact that Valenduc really challenged in the second race, showed that there is possibility, at least hopefully looking ahead to the later or into future races, that we might have a variety of winners within this series.
Yeah, Ben once again picking up the perfect weekend, but in no means did he have to work for this one today. I mean, race 1, he pretty much was able to get away just because of Dan going for the move on Valenduc, which gave him the breathing distance. But yeah, you can see the respect shown from the two of them in the chat as well. It was very much an amazing battle from start to finish of that race 2, and just I guess unfortunate that it came to an end. It was only 30 minutes longer, because I could have kept watching that.
Oh, 100%. And obviously we're talking a lot about the front 2 runners, but massive props to the rest of the pack, as we did have some pretty extraordinary fights across the field, looking towards the likes of Lenson in race 1, Vergers having his own moments, Wilkes, Junior, actually Dave Jr. personally, one of, I would say, the dark horse. I said I didn't want to call him a dark horse earlier on, but I will definitely say a dark horse, at least in terms of actual, I guess, overall race pace within this series, as he didn't really have a good qualifier, but overall his positions always came out net positive, and he just made, as we see on screen there, some pretty extraordinary moves, having hit some moments of his own, but really overall keeping a good fight for the mid-pack.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall it takes one hell of a driver to drive these cars, because they are a lot more of a beast than your typical GT3 car to handle. They drive at the same speed as a GT3 for the most part. It's just with with that lack of traction that it requires a much more, I suppose, tender care and tender right foot. You can't just put your foot down. You can't have a lead foot, so to speak, because the car will loop on you. But overall, I've got to say, a brilliant show from all the drivers. Great driving. We had just the massive wobble from Vestkamp here in race 2. Other than that, and Crook's little wobble through Brussels, everyone basically kept it going pretty perfectly on track with minor slides to none. So it just shows how good these drivers are to be able to do that at a competitive race speed too.
And looking back, can't think how. Or sadly I don't have the math skills or the overall graphics to say the least to see how this has actually affected the overall standings.
We'll figure that one out in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, that's fair. We'll bring you an update at that point. But
speaking of 2 weeks' time, we'll be off to Zandvoort then.
The
old school Zandvoort. So the flat Zandvoort before the banking was introduced. That'll be an interesting one because that's another sandy location where you've really got to keep your track car online, but there's a lot of interesting corners and a lot of trail braking required around there, and throttle management, throttle control, which I think will be a very interesting test once again for these drivers in the Cup car. So I very much look forward to that one happening on the 30th of March. So that will be the last one of the month. And following on from there, that will be just 2 more races to go after that, where we have Zandvoort being the one I just spoke about, Monza, and then Nurburgring to end. So we've just finished the halfway point of the season. We're now going into the back end, and I mean, I think unless Ben misses a week, he's pretty much got it in the bag as long as he turns up and finishes every race. But you never know.
Well, I mean, like you say, he could, with the current gap he has, he could take an entire week off and actually still be ahead. So he might miss a week, but then come back and just build that gap up again if he's still on the same sort of pace. But as shown today, it does seem like if he does that, he will be shooting himself in the foot probably more than he thinks, as the pace difference, at least compared to the rest of the pack, is closing. So he's had a bit of a check-in for his overall defending and race pace. So looking to the future and actually thinking about it, the difference in terms of, I guess, track style is quite extortionate, I would say, between Zandvoort and Spa, because you've gone from a bit of an open track where you have quite a bit of long straights, bit of speed everywhere, to one that's quite a bit tighter. As I think you're quite fond of Zandvoort because it flows. It's a flowing track. So
I do like it in the F1 games, but I don't really play the F1 games anymore, and I can't say I've driven it enough to actually fully get to grips with it here in ACC. So yes and no. It's one that I think in GT3 cars you put a step wrong, you put a foot wrong, and then you're hurting for the next 3 or 4 corners, as you mentioned, because it's all about flow. It is all about flow. So if you step out of line, you'll be hit consecutively for the next 3 to 4 corners, and the time just bleeds away from you more and more. So yes, as mentioned, that is definitely going to be one for the drivers to be on their A game at, and I think Ben's now going to have to be on his A game for every race coming to the end. If not, Yannick Valenduc will be all over the back of him once more. But it doesn't seem like any of the drivers want to come and say their piece about how today went for them. So I guess that just pretty much means we can wrap things up there. So we did give you a run through of what the rest of the season for the SSRI Porsche Supercups will be. But it's not the only thing happening here at Simsport Racing International. If you were unaware, on Tuesday we had the GT3 races going around. I've already forgotten where they went round, even though I did commentate on that. It was Laguna, of course it was. I've seen so much Laguna in the past week that I've completely forgotten about it somehow. I don't know how my brain does that, but it does that. But yeah, there was some brilliant racing happening at Laguna, and then you have... Well, we're at the halfway point of almost every league happening right now. Yeah. So we've just hit the halfway point there for the GT3s. As of Tuesday, we will have the halfway race of the GT4s at Snetterton, which is also where I'm making my debut in the GT4s. So please tune in if you want to see the commentator make a fool of himself somehow also in the pro split. So there you go. It will surely happen at a very wet and rainy
Oh yeah, you'll have a trial
on a
by
track
fire.
I barely know. So
yeah, you'll be fine.
Yeah, indeed, thrown in at the deep end. Thank you, Chris. But if I remember correctly, Chris, you're also on track with me, are you not? He is. So yes, you will see the broadcaster and the commentator on track together. So yeah, you definitely don't want to miss that one. We'll be together at the race start, and then every other time we crash or one of us crashes, we'll see. But if that's not your thing, then last but not least, we do also have the race room events going on opposite Thursdays to the Porsche Cup cars. I think that's everything. So a final farewell and good night from myself, Patrick.
And a final farewell from me, I guess, on that one.
And also, thank you, Chris, for the amazing pictures as always. From everyone here at Simsport Racing International, thank you and good night.